Last night's episode of Joy Behar's show started like any other, with the host delivering her monologue to the usual mix of applause and forced laughter. The audience had no idea they were about to witness one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night television history. Jason Momoa, there to promote his latest directorial project, walked onto the set with his characteristic confidence, flashing that million-dollar smile as he waved to the crowd. But behind the scenes, tensions had already been simmering for hours. Sources close to the production revealed that Momoa's team had specifically requested certain topics be off limits during the interview. The actor, known for his professionalism and measured approach to media appearances, had made it clear through his representatives that he wouldn't discuss his recent breakup or address rumors about his personal relationships. It was a reasonable request from a star who had always maintained clear boundaries between his public and private life. But Joy Behar had other plans. As Mamoa settled into the guest chair, adjusting his perfectly tailored suit jacket, something felt different about the host's demeanor. The usual pre-interview banter that typically puts guests at ease was noticeably absent. Instead, Behar's eyes held a calculating gleam, the kind that suggested she was already planning her next move in what would soon become a verbal chess match. "So Jason," Behar began, her voice carrying that familiar tone that regular viewers know can shift from friendly to cutting in an instant. "Thanks for being here tonight. I have to say you look great for someone who's been through such a challenging few months." The comment hung in the air like a loaded gun. Momoa's smile flickered for just a moment, but he maintained his composure with the skill of someone who'd navigated countless interviews. "Thanks for having me, Joy. I'm excited to talk about the film." "Oh, we'll get to that," Behar replied, leaning back in her chair with the casual confidence of someone who held all the cards. "But first, I think our audience would love to know how you're really doing. I mean, personally, it's got to be tough being in the spotlight when your private life becomes such public entertainment." The camera caught Momoa's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. This was exactly what his team had asked to avoid. Yet here was Behar, barely 3 minutes into the interview, already pushing those boundaries with surgical precision. "I'm doing great, actually," Mamoa responded, his voice steady, but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "I'm focused on my work, which is why I'm here tonight. This new project represents everything I'm passionate about as both an actor and a director." But Behar wasn't finished. She had caught the scent of discomfort, and like a predator sensing weakness, she pressed forward. "That's interesting that you mentioned passion, because I've been following some of the stories about your recent adventures in the dating world. Must be nice to have so many options when you're Jason Momoa, right?" The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. Even they could sense that something was off about the host's line of questioning. This wasn't the playful ribbing that Behar was known for. This felt personal, almost vindictive. Momoa's publicist, sitting in the green room, was already reaching for her phone, but she knew there was nothing she could do now. The interview was live, and her client was on his own. "Joy," Momoa said, his voice taking on a warning tone that anyone who knew him would recognize as a sign to back off. "I thought we were here to talk about my film. That's what your producers and I agreed on." "Oh, come on, Jason," Behar shot back, her fake smile growing wider. "You can't expect to come on a talk show and not talk, right? Besides, inquiring minds want to know. You've built this image as Hollywood's golden boy, but some of these recent stories suggest there might be more to the story." The host was now fully committed to her attack, seemingly oblivious to, or perhaps deliberately ignoring the fact that her guest was rapidly losing patience. In the control room, producers were frantically gesturing, trying to signal Behar to change direction. But she was in full predator mode now. Momoa leaned forward slightly, his famous charm completely evaporated. "What exactly are you trying to say, Joy?" And that's when viewers at home and the studio audience alike realized they weren't watching a typical celebrity interview anymore. They were witnessing the beginning of something much more dangerous. A confrontation that would expose the ugly underbelly of entertainment journalism and leave both people's reputations hanging in the balance. The tension in the studio was now palpable, with camera operators adjusting their shots to capture every micro-expression, sensing that they were documenting something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. What started as a simple promotional appearance was rapidly transforming into a battle of wills that neither person seemed prepared to lose. But this was only the beginning, and what happened next would shock everyone watching. Bihar's smirk widened as she sensed she had Mamoa exactly where she wanted him, off balance and defensive. The host had made a career out of these moments, pushing celebrities just far enough to create viral content while maintaining plausible deniability. But tonight she had severely miscalculated her opponent. What I'm trying to say, Bihar continued, her voice dripping with false innocence, is that maybe it's time that we had an honest conversation about the real Jason Momoa. Not the carefully crafted image your PR team sells, but the guy behind all those carefully staged photo ops and strategic relationships. The words hit like a slap across the face. Momoa's hands, which had been casually resting on the armrests of his chair, slowly clenched into fists. The camera zoomed in on his face, capturing the exact moment when his legendary composure began to crack. Carefully staged, Mamoa repeated, his voice dangerously low. Strategic relationships. Joy, I don't know what kind of show you think you're running here, but this isn't journalism. This is tabloid trash disguised as entertainment. The studio audience fell silent. Even the most casual viewers could sense that something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't banter anymore. This was war. Bihar, either oblivious to the danger or deliberately provoking it further, leaned forward with predatory enthusiasm. Oh, come on, Jason. Everyone in Hollywood knows how the game works. Beautiful people, beautiful publicity, beautiful careers built on beautiful lies. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. What everyone else is thinking. Momoa's voice rose slightly, the first crack in his professional facade. Or what you're thinking, because it sounds to me like you've got some kind of personal issue you're trying to work out on national television. The host's expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of something ugly and vindictive that the cameras caught before she could hide it behind her trademark grin. Personal issue, Jason, I'm just doing my job. Maybe if you weren't so sensitive about a few harmless questions, we could actually have a real conversation. Harmless questions? Mamoa stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward with the force of his movement. The sudden action sent a ripple of shock through the studio audience, and several cameramen quickly adjusted their angles to capture the full scope of what was unfolding. Sit down, Jason, Bihar said, her voice taking on a condescending tone that made the situation infinitely worse. We're not done here. Actually, we are done, Mamoa shot back, his voice now carrying the full weight of his anger. This is exactly what's wrong with this industry. You invite people on your show under false pretenses, ambush them with personal attacks, and then act like they're the problem when they don't play along with your sick little games. The control room was in chaos. Producers were shouting instructions into their headsets, trying to figure out whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation play out. The network executives watching from their offices were simultaneously horrified and fascinated. This was either going to be a career-ending disaster or the most talked-about television moment of the year. Bihar, perhaps realizing she had pushed too far, but unable to back down without losing face, doubled down on her attack. Games, Jason. This is reality. This is what happens when you build your entire career on being the perfect guy. Eventually, people start asking questions about whether any of it is real. You want real? Momoa's voice was now loud enough to carry throughout the entire studio without his microphone. Here's real. You're a bitter, washed-up comedian who gets her kicks tearing down people who are actually trying to make something of themselves. You hide behind this fake nice guy persona, but underneath it all, you're just another Hollywood predator looking for your next victim. The gasps from the audience were audible. Now social media was already exploding with clips and reactions. But the people in the studio were witnessing something unprecedented, a complete breakdown of the carefully orchestrated world of late-night television. Bihar's face flushed red, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. Predator? You're calling me a predator? That's rich coming from someone whose dating life reads like a Hollywood casting call. There it is, Mamoa said, pointing an accusatory finger at the host. There's the real Joy Behar. Not the lovable goofball your audience thinks they know, but the nasty, vindictive little woman who can't stand seeing other people succeed. The tension in the room was suffocating. Security guards near the stage were visibly tensing, unsure whether they needed to intervene. The band members sat frozen, their instruments silent, as they watched the verbal warfare unfold before them. "You know what your problem is, Jason?" Behar was on her feet now too, abandoning any pretense of professional decorum. "You think being pretty and famous makes you untouchable? Well, guess what? We all see through the act." "The only act here is yours, Joy," Mamoa fired back. 20 years of pretending to be America's sweetheart while you systematically destroy anyone who won't play your games. How many other guests have you ambushed like this? How many careers have you tried to damage because it makes for good television?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, and for the first time since the confrontation began, Behar seemed genuinely rattled. But instead of backing down, she made the decision that would ultimately seal both their fates. What happened next would not only end the interview, but spark an industry-wide conversation about the dark side of entertainment journalism. Behar's eyes narrowed as she processed Momoa's accusations. Instead of de-escalating, she made the fatal decision to go nuclear. "You want to talk about careers and games, Jason? Let's talk about how you've built your entire brand on being the sensitive, socially conscious heartthrob, while conveniently ignoring some very interesting stories that haven't made it to the tabloids yet." The threat was unmistakable. Momoa's face went deadly serious as he realized what Behar was implying. "Are you threatening me on live television?" "I'm not threatening anyone," Behar replied, her voice taking on a sinister quality that her audience had never heard before. "I'm just saying that maybe before you start throwing around words like predator, you should make sure your own house is in order because, trust me, Jason, there are stories out there that would make your fans see you in a very different light." The studio had gone completely silent except for the hum of the cameras. Even the crew members were staring in disbelief. This had crossed every line of professional conduct and entered territory that could destroy both people's careers. Momoa's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Joy, I'm going to give you one chance to walk that back because if you're suggesting what I think you're suggesting, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything," Behar said, her smirk returning with renewed viciousness. "I'm just wondering if your fans know about some of the interesting company you've been keeping lately. Some very young company, if you know what I mean." The insinuation hit the room like a bomb. Momoa's face went from anger to something far more dangerous. The cold fury of a man whose character had been assassinated on national television. The accusation was clearly baseless, a desperate attempt by Behar to regain control of the narrative. But the damage was done the moment the words left her mouth. "You sick piece of garbage," Mamoa said, his voice barely audible, but carrying enough venom to make everyone in the studio recoil. "You just accused me of something unthinkable on live television and without a shred of evidence. Do you have any idea what you've just done?" The cameras captured every moment as Momoa's legendary composure finally shattered completely. His hands were shaking with rage, his voice cracking with the weight of what had just been implied about his character. The audience could see a man watching his reputation being destroyed in real time by a host who had clearly lost all sense of professional boundaries. Behar, perhaps finally realizing the magnitude of what she had just done, tried to backtrack. "Now, hold on, I never said anything specific. I was just making a general observation about celebrity culture." "And don't you dare try to walk this back now," Mamoa exploded, his voice echoing through the studio. "You just implied that I have inappropriate relationships with young women on national television. You just destroyed my reputation with a baseless insinuation because you couldn't handle being called out for your behavior." The control room was in complete panic. Producers were screaming into their headsets, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. The legal department was already being called, knowing that this moment would likely result in lawsuits. That could bankrupt the network. "Jason, calm down," Behar said, her voice now carrying a note of genuine panic, as she seemed to realize the enormity of what she had just done. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here." "Misunderstanding?" Momoa's laugh was bitter and harsh. You just committed character assassination on live television and you want to call it a misunderstanding. You're done, Joy. You're absolutely done. The audience was now murmuring nervously, some people beginning to get up and leave, uncomfortable with witnessing what felt like a complete breakdown of civilized discourse. Security guards were moving closer to the stage, though they seemed unsure of what exactly they were supposed to do. Look, maybe we should take a commercial break, Behar suggested weakly. But Mamoa was having none of it. No commercial break, Mamoa said firmly. You wanted to have this conversation on live television, so let's have it. Let's talk about how you've been systematically destroying people for years, hiding behind your fake smile and your carefully crafted image. Let's talk about how you ambush guests who trust you enough to come on your show, then attack them when they don't give you what you want. The accusations were flying now, with Mamoa clearly deciding that if his reputation was going to be destroyed, he was going to take Behar down with him. The host, perhaps realizing that her career was now hanging in the balance, made one final desperate attempt to regain control. You know what, Jason? Maybe the real issue here is that you can't handle a little honest questioning. Maybe you're so used to having everyone kiss your ass that you can't deal with someone who isn't impressed by your pretty face and your carefully rehearsed charm. It was the wrong thing to say it at the worst possible moment. Momoa's response would be the final nail in the coffin of what had once been a civilized interview. Honest questioning? Momoa's voice was now filled with righteous indignation. You call spreading lies and making baseless accusations honest questioning? You're not a journalist, Joy. You're a tabloid bottom feeder who's been masquerading as an entertainer for so long that you've forgotten the difference between news and gossip. The confrontation had now reached a point where both people were completely committed to mutual destruction. The audience could sense that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. But what happened next would ensure that this moment would be remembered as one of the most shocking in television history. Mamoa took a step closer to Behar's desk, his imposing frame casting a shadow over the cowering host. You want to know what honest looks like, Joy? Honest is me telling your audience exactly who you really are. You're a failed comedian who found a way to stay relevant by tearing down people who are actually trying to make something of themselves. Security, Behar called out, her voice cracking with desperation. But Mamoa wasn't done. Don't call security on me, Mamoa said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect his entire career. I'm not threatening you physically, though God knows you deserve it. I'm just giving you the same treatment you give your guests, except I'm telling the truth. The cameras were capturing everything as Mamoa turned to face the audience directly, bypassing Behar entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, you just witnessed something that happens behind the scenes in Hollywood every single day. Powerful people using their platforms to destroy others for their own entertainment. This woman invited me here under false pretenses, ambushed me with personal attacks, and then when I called her out on her behavior, she made disgusting accusations about my character without a shred of evidence. The audience was transfixed. They could see the raw pain and anger in Momoa's eyes, the genuine hurt of someone whose reputation had been attacked in front of millions of people. This wasn't acting. This was a man fighting for his integrity in real time. You want to know why I'm really angry? Mamoa continued, his voice now steady but filled with controlled fury. It's not because of what she said about me. I can handle lies and gossip. I've been dealing with that my entire career. I'm angry because this is exactly what drives talented people away from this industry. This is why good people stop wanting to be in the public eye, because they know that one day they might end up sitting across from someone like Joy Behar, who will destroy them for the sake of a viral moment. Behar tried to interrupt, but Mamoa held up a hand that silenced her immediately. The gesture was so commanding that even the host seemed to shrink back into her chair. I came here tonight to talk about a project I'm passionate about. A film that tackles important social issues and could actually make a difference in people's lives. Instead, I got ambushed by a woman who thinks destroying people's reputations is her entertainment. Well, congratulations, Joy. You got your viral moment. I hope it was worth it. Mamoa began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. To everyone watching at home, this is what the real entertainment industry looks like when the cameras are rolling, but the script goes off the rails. This is what happens when someone with a platform decides to use it as a weapon instead of a tool for bringing people together. The silence in the studio was deafening. Even the band members who had seen countless celebrity meltdowns over the years looked stunned by the raw emotion and dignity Momoa was displaying in what should have been his moment of greatest vulnerability. "Joy," Momoa said, turning back to face the host one final time, "you just destroyed your own career on live television. Not because of anything I said, but because you showed millions of people who you really are underneath that fake smile. They saw you make baseless accusations against someone's character because you couldn't handle being called out for your behavior. That's not entertainment, that's character assassination, and everyone watching knows the difference." With that, Mamoa tossed his microphone onto Behar's desk with a loud thud that echoed through the studio's sound system. He straightened his jacket, looked directly into the main camera one last time and said, "Good night, America. You deserve better than this." The actor walked off the stage with his head held high, leaving behind a stunned silence that stretched for what felt like an eternity. Behar sat frozen in her chair, her face pale and her usual smirk nowhere to be found. The audience began to murmur, then applaud, then cheer as they realized they had just witnessed someone take a stand against the toxic culture that had infected Hollywood for decades. As Mamoa disappeared backstage, Behar finally found her voice. "We'll be right back after these messages," she said weakly, but her words were drowned out by the continued applause from an audience that clearly sided with the man who had just walked away. The cameras cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were trending across every social media platform. Team Jason Momoa began trending worldwide, while Joy Behar Exposed followed close behind. The consensus was overwhelming. Mamoa had exposed something ugly about the entertainment industry, and audiences were disgusted by what they had seen. The fallout was immediate and devastating for Behar. Sponsors began pulling their support before the show even ended. Network executives were fielding calls from outraged board members. The woman who had built her career on being America's lovable talk show host had revealed herself to be something far more sinister. And the viewing public's reaction was swift and unforgiving. Jason Momoa, meanwhile, had accomplished something remarkable. He had turned what should have been a career-ending ambush into a powerful statement about integrity and dignity in the face of adversity. He had shown millions of people that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away with your principles intact. The confrontation that began as Joy Behar's attempt to create viral content had instead become her professional downfall, while simultaneously elevating Mamoa to an even higher level of respect and admiration from fans who had witnessed his grace under the most unimaginable pressure.